WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're taking the Maryland Crab Cake Tour out on the road. I used to have, oh, I do. I have some instant lottery scratch. They were in my bag because I spent Thursday afternoon in beautiful Middle River, or was it Essex? I'm not really sure. We were at McFall's Oyster and Reel. We spent some great time with Glenn McFall, as well as my friend Terry Cook, who was in the same competition that Luke Jones was in 15 years ago around here, as well as Pete Carinci came out. We're going to be at State Fair next week with our friends at Window Nation, 86690 Nation. I want to remind everybody about that as well. I'm wearing a State Fair shirt, having their crab cake. We're going to be joined by CFG Bank President Bill Weedell, as well as some other great guests. We're going to be in Catonsville in the 21228, back in our original homeland where we began Baltimore Positive. Thursday afternoon, this guy, I heard him on the radio and the television and the interwebs as I was making my way to Essex or Middle River, or what they around there call Sioux Creek. And the Lamar Jackson press conference was on this TV, that TV, ESPN, everywhere. The green shirt, sort of reminiscent of 5 years ago. Luke Jones was there. He's the real reporter here at WNST. And dude, I think we all wait for the purple smoke, and I've been joking about the Purple Infinity 8 sideways going to the, I don't want to say it was an uneventful press conference, but you were there. I wasn't there. It feels to me like when they do these things now, it's a big black back slap. It's a big, everybody from the organization's in there to, it's not really a press conference from what I used to call a press conference.
Well, I mean, it's a press conference, but ultimately you can ask the questions, but if the individual who has the podium isn't going to really answer a whole lot, it is what it is, right? I mean, you can't get storm the stage with pitchforks and torches or anything like that. I mean, right off the bat, very first question, Lamar was asked, hey, 8 weeks earlier, you had asked to be traded by the Baltimore Ravens, on March 2nd. Of course, you tweeted it out 3.5 weeks later. What changed? I mean, it's
where's the accountability for that? I mean, I just think he's a kid who's never had to really answer. He's got a statue. He's got $200 million. He's won one playoff game. End of story. Now the team's on the hook, and they have to go win they have to win a Super Bowl. I mean, you're going to ask the questions after the games in San Francisco, LA, whatever, but like all of this is over with now. Now he's the guy with a little bit of the target on the back to say, all right, we paid you. Now you have to, you're no longer the running back. You're no longer the 32nd draft pick. You're not, you are the highest paid man in the country at what you do.
Yeah. I mean, that's the burden that comes with a $260 million contract. Or let's be clear, any quarterback, basically any young quarterback not named Patrick Mahomes right now, is going to face that same burden. Jalen Hurts got to a Super Bowl, but he didn't win it. People in Philadelphia will remind him very quickly of that.
It reminds Jaworski all the time. That's 40 years later.
I mean, that's reality. And really, over the last 20 years, I mean, Tom Brady was kind of the one guy that didn't get those questions. And even he had a 10-year period where he didn't win a Super Bowl.
Look, Joe Flacco won here, and if you ask people on the street, he was a bum that got overpaid, that didn't do much at the end. You know what I mean? Like, that's amazing to me. It really is. Over the body of the work, over 50 years of my life, seeing players who deliver and players who are paid and then might deliver. And right now, Lamar's a might. I mean, and he might 2 or 3 times. I don't know. But at this point, the conversation has now changed over the last 10 days. I think we're in it. You and I are going to have a different expectation. I'm certainly going to be holding him accountable, whether Chad Steele wants me to or not, every Monday morning and calling this here on the radio. And that's not just me. That's everybody who's got purple anything, a purple flamingo on the lawn. It's now like, you're making twice as much as Flacco ever made. So like here, and you're 20% of the cap, and there's all of that, right? So like the pressure that Eddie Murray, Chris Davis, pick anybody that made money who was a star in this town, and the burden of winning a championship, it's going to be on him. Adley Rutschman's going to have it now. Everybody wants him extended. He's been here 3 weeks.
Well, I mean, you mentioned about Flacco. Look, the cap's gone up, money's gone up. That's always relative, right? So let's be fair about that part at least. But the pressure's there. There's no question about it. And let's be clear. Lamar Jackson's not the first and will not be the last quarterback who hasn't won anything in January to get paid, because if that was the standard, very few quarterbacks would get paid. As I just mentioned, a guy named Tom Brady did the bulk of the winning over the last 2 decades in the NFL when it comes to the pinnacle. So there's always some of that, and you'll find Hall of Famers. I mean, Dan Marino got to 1 Super Bowl, lost, and never got back again. I mean,
It's
that's
really
just
hard to do, man.
it is. It is. So that's where, but to your point, and I do agree wholeheartedly, the pressure is on not just Lamar. Let's be clear about that. It should be the entire organization at this point, Nestor. They have not gotten past the divisional round in over a decade now. 2012 was over a
Yeah,
decade now.
Harbaugh and DeCosta have been here longer, and right. I mean, and they are
Sure.
the attacks.
So, and that's not to say that making anyone a scapegoat, but the standard needs to change at this point. I mean, there are no more excuses. And I wrote this at BaltimorePositive.com this week. I'll continue to say this as we get closer and closer to the season. Your franchise quarterback under contract, new offensive coordinator, guy that's going to place more of an emphasis on the passing game than in the past. Although certainly I'll continue to push back on the notion that they're going to throw 45 times a game, but they're going to throw more than they did in the past. I wholeheartedly believe that. They have new wide receivers. They have all but one starter returning on the offensive line. They have one of the 2 or 3 best tight ends in all of football and 2 young tight ends behind him who I think showed promise as rookies. They have 2 very formidable running backs. I just rattled off every element of this offense that you should feel really good about on paper. Doesn't mean they're going to be the best in the league, but everything I just laid out are all the elements that should be in place that come January, you can go toe to toe with any other team out there. And of course, defense factors in. And I'll remind you, this is a good defense on paper, especially with having added Rock Yassin at corner earlier this week. So every element is there for them to not just make the playoffs, but to then make a deep January run. And I said to you, as we talked earlier in the week, you asked me where I see this team right now. I think they're absolutely a divisional round team. I think they're a top 4 team in the AFC. And then after that, we're going to have to see, because to your point, everyone on this roster, every active player at this point, other than Justin Tucker, who, no disrespect, but he is still the kicker and still only so involved in what happens over the course of a 60-minute game. Everyone's legacy is kind of lacking in that way. And you just mentioned it, even Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh. It's been a long time since they've tasted late January winning. So the pressure's there for
the
the
Humphreys and the Ronnie Stanleys too, who have been here. I mean, they're getting to be 30-year-old gentlemen who are very wealthy, who they sit and watch the playoffs like you and I do every year lately, right? Literally.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's not just Lamar. I mean, Ronnie Stanley got a top of market deal at the time. Mark Andrews, I think, 3rd best deal at the time. Marlon Humphrey, one of the top deals at the time.
Roquan Smith, throw him in there.
Yeah, Roquan Smith now. Yeah, I mean, so you have plenty of guys who fit that category, but at the end of the day, there's one guy who's the highest paid player in NFL history for the time being. Of course, that's going to change whenever Joe Burrow gets his deal at some point, presumably this offseason. But it's, this is why you get that check, that expectation, that pressure comes with it. And I think Lamar Jackson understands that. I think he does. And ultimately, we're going to see how this plays out. But everything is in place now. There was nothing terribly earth-shattering about Thursday's press conference. I wasn't really expecting that. Lots of talk about not worrying about the past and, the trade request and all that, which, look,
but
at
the
the
kid
end of the
sits
day,
up there and
Nestor
says he never wanted to leave, and he requested a trade very publicly and threw manure in the coach's face in the middle of a press con. Like, all that happened a month ago. It really did. And I don't want to say, I mean, Harbaugh's a big boy. He's been used like a pinata and shall continue to be here for.
And he's used players in the past too. I mean, there have been players that he's thrown under the bus.
The whole thing is
business.
Yeah, and relatively itchy sleazy on the borderline of we're not going to have accountability, and we're going to say one thing in March and do another thing in April, and back in December the guy in Pennsylvania can commit fellatio upon himself, and like all of these things, right, that have gone on. I'm holding the sign, I need the money, pay the man, the Twitter feeds, SpongeBob, like I just play foot. You know what I want to do? I mean, and this is me like washing out on all of this. Honestly, I'm happier watching the baseball team right now and watch people just be excited about the baseball team. After 30 years, it feels a little more fresh to me than whatever press conferences, and if he's going to come to practice or if he's not going to come to practice or whatever, because they're not playing until September. And
Yeah.
after all of these years, the highs and lows of contracts and time for play and time for pay, as Billick would say around here, and the draft picks and like all of that, I I used to be more elated about it when it was more front facing, but the press conferences have become literally like Saturday Night Live skits for me. Watching them on a screen, not being a part of it after 30 years, it's bizarre. All of it's staged, all of it's performative. I mean, clearly Chad sat with Lamar and said, "You're going to say you're talking about nothing," because he doesn't have an agent. I don't know if his mother would give him that advice. I don't know if he would take Chad's advice, but whatever that was it was just a scripted. You asked me to put it on the radio, and I'm like, I'm more interesting. Pete Caringi and you and I are more interesting than running 45 minutes of just boojah. Yeah, I don't know what else to call it. I mean, I watch it, and I didn't glean anything out of it other than they're never going to tell you. They don't want to tell you. They paid him. We're all about it. It was like a Mark McGuire congressional hearing. You know what I mean? It was. I don't know. I think the fans deserve a little bit more than that when you asked to be traded 6 weeks ago. You can say something beyond like I never said that or forget that I said that.
Yeah, but I mean, as I pointed out at the time, it's not the first guy who's done that and ended up staying here in Baltimore.
Oh,
Certainly
you were
talking
very
about,
level-headed, I must say. Kudos to you.
I mean, like I said, Ray Lewis wanted to be traded a long time ago, and also became a free agent a long time ago. And we're prisoners to the moment. And look, that's not to say that I was 100% nothing to see here, but it was really one of those scenarios when he requested that trade. It was shocking for 3 hours, but then as you thought about it more, you kind of said, well, you know what? Him saying that really isn't all that terribly different than the Ravens giving him the non-exclusive franchise tag to begin with. I mean, it was the same deal. And Eric
Leave
did
here, leave.
one of the things he did talk about over the course of the press conference on Thursday was flat out kind of thinking maybe this is what's best for Lamar to have an opportunity to go out there and see what his market would be, acknowledging it wasn't pure true free agency because of all the other variables attached. And we've talked about that. And we don't need to rehash all that at this point. But it was an opportunity for him to at least seek what other potential interest is out there. And I think it was pretty evident that it was tepid at the very, that's probably the nicest way I could put it. Now, if he was a full-blown unrestricted free agent, that would have been different. And we'll see what that would have been. I don't think it would have meant the Watson deal for him, but I think he would have had teams more interested than they were. But ultimately, it came down to they got it done. He dismissed the notion that Jalen Hurts' contract had any meaningful impact, but I'm not buying that. I think the timing is just too perfect. 10 days after Jalen Hurts reached his deal with the Eagles, Lamar Jackson reaches a deal with the Ravens. That's for a little bit more, right? And it's got a good first-year payout, good 3-year payout. I think it's it's one of those deals that I think both teams or both sides can absolutely call it a win because ultimately the best scenario for the Ravens was ultimately Lamar Jackson returning because what were you going to do? Start over? Johnny Unitas reincarnate was not guaranteed to walk through that door. So that's a heck of a chance you're taking. And on the flip side, Lamar did not get the Deshaun Watson full guarantee, but he still got a very fair top of market deal that when you're talking about the circle of elite quarterbacks, wherever you want to rank them, 1 through 7 or 8, whatever it is, Lamar's somewhere in that group. He was next up, just like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert will be next up after that. And that's how it works. And
to your
and Josh
point, and to where Joe Flacco was, being next up is better in April of 2023 than it would have been in November of 2022, than it would have been in March of 2021, than it would have been in his MVP year, which was 4 or 5 years ago. That was so $15 million a year ago for quarterbacks, like literally, right? And that's part of this. And when he says, and again, I mean, I think he's been telling white lies his whole life and has never had to have anybody like me really asking questions and say that's bullshit. And here's the proof, right? Like that's never happened to him. Like, and it's never gonna happen to him because he's so handled at this point, and now he's got enough money to be handled, right? But so if I broke down the press conference and went through everything and said, well, that doesn't feel. If I were a lawyer in a courtroom and say that's not accurate, you're going back on what you said. There's none of that. There's none of any of that. But the bargainer in him and the businessman in him and him saying, I'm good for now, right? That would have been 2020. In 2020, if they would have redone the deal and given him 33 million or 35, whatever that number would have been for being the MVP, at this point, even after 2 injuries, he could still say, I'm not a $34 million a year quarterback. I'm a $52 million a year quarterback. Even though I haven't played the last 2 years in January, even all of the check marks that would go against him, even though I didn't show up in Cincinnati, like all of that, I'm now a $50 million quarterback. So when Burrow gets 63 or Herbert or it might be Richardson with the Colts beating up Jimmy Irsay 2 years from now if they go win 13 games, right? Or it might be Trevor Lawrence. Whatever this next class is, Lamar now comes back as a 28-year-old or 29-year-old and says, well, I won 2 playoff games back in 24 and still top of class. That dude's getting 60. Why am I getting 50? So that's the for now part. But your astute observation, and this, I want to let everybody know how dead on you are about this, is like, he signed the deal. He's next up. Next up always gets the most money. And Joe told me that 10 years ago. And Joe said, that's why I didn't sign in 9 or 10 or 11 or 12. And that's why I was like, as long as I don't break my leg. I mean, hell, you can not make the playoffs 2 years in a row, be ready to play. You can sash your team, sash your coach, do all this, and still get $260 million. So that's how valuable Lamar Jackson is. He's make or break. He's use or lose. They couldn't give him away. I mean, they told him to go walk. They couldn't get an offer on him. So then they competed with themselves, which in April of 2023, it's here. He's a top 8 quarterback. This is what we have to pay him. And if he's pissed, we're pissed, he gets hurt, whatever, where we are 2-3 years from now, John's got a job, Eric's got a job, Steve's got a franchise that's worth a couple $100 million more, and we rolled the dice and we gave it a chance. And at least back on May 5th, Luke and Nestor went on the air and called them a playoff contender, because they are. I mean, and they're not without him. So they had to do this. I mean, that's really the pilot. They had to do this. The Ravens didn't have any choice. And that's why I think Lamar won. Even though you and I have had an argument, we'll continue to have that argument. I saw the numbers. Lamar's a big, big winner here because Lamar can come back at any time and say, I don't want to play. I need more.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say to what you just mentioned as far as waiting and the cost of business going up, keep in mind, though, if he had signed now, remind everyone, he was not eligible after his MVP year for his deal to be touched at that point. It's after 3 years. I mean, that's correct. Part of the collective bargaining agreement. So you have that. I'm just pointing it out for everyone, but you have that. If he had signed at that point in time, and the easy comparison that we've talked about is Joe Flacco, right? Let's just use that as a very easy comparison. We know the money's different because it's a decade later and all that, but if he had signed in 2021, yes, the average annual value of that deal would have been smaller, but when would he have been looking at already going back to the negotiating table? Next offseason. 3 years is when Joe Flacco was back at the table, getting an extension because the Ravens had to work the deal. And you kind of look at how this deal is structured in the same way. So I'll remind everyone, yeah, you can say you can wait and the price will go up. And Joe Flacco was a unique circumstance. Joe was never anything remotely close to being a regular season MVP. He just wasn't. Lamar Jackson was unanimous NFL MVP and made a couple Pro Bowls. So playoffs, we can talk about that. The legacies being different and Lamar still chasing that part of it. But for Joe, it truly was that perfect moment in time for him that Lamar hypothetically would have been post 2019. But like I said, CBA wise wasn't eligible yet. But every time you wait,
which is a good thing for him because he would have gotten less money, right? I mean, to some degree.
It is, but it's
not. But he cost himself
because,
$20 million last year. Like literally.
Right, that's the thing, because everyone talks about waiting because the price goes up, but you never get that time back. And you're also, when you wait, what are you also doing? You're also delaying your next bite at the apple. So the difference of what I'm trying to explain here is if Lamar had signed as a 24-year-old, he would probably be going back to the table next offseason for another extension at age 27. Now, with him having done this as a 26-year-old, the way this deal is structured, you're talking about his next bite at the apple, either with the Ravens or, if heaven forbid this thing goes sideways, is age 29, age 30, somewhere like that. So you always have to think about that, and you have to think about it in terms of he played for well below market last year and incredibly well, extraordinarily below market 2 years ago. Is he going to make up that earnings, that money over the long run?
I think he
Look,
just
at
did.
the end of the day,
He
Lamar Jackson is, yeah. I don't know I don't know if he did long term, but the point is he's doing mighty fine for himself, and that's where at the end of the day we can keep talking about this, and we'll talk about it through the lens of how this team is doing, and what this team's doing in terms of getting to the playoffs and doing something in January, but through the lens of his long-term financial security and really maximizing the transcendent talent that he is, and setting up his family for generations and generations. Yeah, I think everyone can sleep well on that front at this point, and not worry for him. But we'll see how this plays out. You look at the deal and how it's structured. With PFT had the numbers late on Thursday afternoon. Cap number for this year, 22 million. Cap number for next year, 33 million. Cap number for the year after that, 43.5. So, those numbers are not outrageous. Those numbers are favorable when you're talking about having a top shelf quarterback. It's after that you're going to be talking about, all right, 74.5 million, 74.5 million after that. So those are the 2 years that you kind of look at and say, this is a 3-year deal for, $156 million basically. And then you see what happens after that. And if he's still playing at a high level,
Lamar won. 3 years, $156 million. Lamar got his $20 million back next year and from last year, and Lamar's good. Now Lamar's got to go win. Now the Ravens have to win.
And I will just say this. If you want to say Lamar won, that's fine. He didn't win in terms of what he was asking for all along, but at the same time,
worth it. Nobody in the market thought he was worth it. And if they want to talk collusion, and believe me, I think these 32 people are, they're dirty souled humans. I've been amongst them. I've watched the act up close, real up close, in my phone up close, especially with the guy that owns this team. And this is the cost of doing business for a $6 billion business, to put on a face, to make sure that they're competitive, to make sure that for the next 5 months we believe there's hope. Art Modell would always say they're in the business of selling hope, 8 months a year. And we now have that. I want to ask you this and if you're done with Lamar, I'm done with Lamar, because it's a weekend and I want to talk a little baseball with you. And as it relates to Adley Rutschman, because I'm with Pete Caringi, who's nobody's dummy. Pete's run UMBC for 32 years, World Cup. He knows how money works. He knows how contracts work. He's brought all these kids in. He understands compliance. He understands all of that. And the first thing this grown man says to me is, why haven't they extended Adley yet? It's like, and he's been here a minute and a half. That's going to be the next fire, right? Like Lamar was the fire. Now I'm hearing extend Adley Rutschman in May. He's been up a year. But the baseball thing, this is interesting because unlike Lamar, where they couldn't do it after the MVP, this is going to be the next battle drum. The next big contract's going to be whatever the Orioles do. And there's no salary cap. There's none of that. And the future of the franchise, it really brings into focus the baseball season and how good these guys are, because they're on fire. As an entity right now, Orioles baseball is a stock. It's a good stock right now. You're on a good beat.
Yeah, it really is. And whether that's going to translate to packed ballparks is another conversation, but the interest level, no doubt. There is. And my goodness, that afternoon finale in Kansas City. I think you made the comment that was like a whole season in and of itself that they ended up winning at the end. But it's so exciting to have this kind of a start. And again, we can talk about the schedule, and we're going to see, things are going to change now. They're going to play Atlanta. They're going to play Tampa Bay. They're playing Pittsburgh, which who would have thought playing the Pirates would be a notable series? My pastor's happy about it, but it certainly didn't see that coming. But the business is going to pick up in terms of the competition they're going to play. So are they going to continue to play, in this neighborhood of 667 approaching 700 ball? Probably not. But You beat up on the teams you're supposed to. You hold your own against the tougher teams. You know, win some series. You know, you're going to lose some series as well, but just so you're not getting into those stretches where you're losing 8 of 10, you're fine. You know, and you're keeping yourself in good position. And yeah, I think there's still plenty of questions on the starting pitching front, and we've really seen that, look up for a while and not so great after that, and kind of up and down. The bullpen, uh, Kansas City finale notwithstanding, has been
Well, I mean,
outstanding.
it was 8-1 at one point, and Pete and I started talking, and the
Yeah,
more Pete and I talked, the worse the pitching got. By the time Pete left McFalls, they were losing, and I'm like, what's going
right.
on here? You know?
Yeah, exactly. So, on the pitching front, there's still improvement to be made. Let's put it that way.
Well, the
That's
Grayson
probably the
Rodriguez thing is the next. That's another Lamar conversation because everybody's expecting him to be Jim Palmer, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean he's looked really good at times, and other times he's looked like a rookie. So you have that. But hey, Dean Kramer, who looked great last year, looked not great, really good for the bulk of last year. He's really struggled to start off the year. It's tough, and I don't say that to be wishy-washy, but success in the major leagues can be very fleeting. So it really is that marathon scenario. But they've got to pitch more consistently with some of the tougher competition coming up. But this lineup, with their ability to work counts and do the things that they do, steal some bases, certainly power, and it's not even as though you've had everyone really clicking offensively.
Yeah, but they've been
they're in it.
situationally.
They're in it every
I mean,
night.
Mullins comes up with the bases load and hits it.
Yeah.
Like everybody in the lineup feels like a threat. I mean, even Frazier when he's in there. I mean, it feels like that Oriole Magic thing that like maybe Dempsey will get the hit tonight, even though he's hitting 214 with runners in scoring position, or whatever it is. And I mean, hats off to Brandon Hyde for managing through all of this, and certainly. I think we'll all agree, and this goes back to your original sin of the offseason, which is they didn't try hard to get their pitching better. They didn't try really hard. They sort of, we'll get by, we'll be okay. And there's been 30 years of that. So, and I keep saying to people, and I have no internal belief that John Angelos is going to open up his checkbook or that wants to or feels like he's bright. I have no idea what's going on there because that guy lies. If I sat with him, he would lie to me. His old man lied to me out at the barn. Every time I play. I mean, it's just like they're serial liars. So even spending time with them and trying to hold them accountable, it just drills them into further lies, like they're going to open their books, or like we're going to buy a pitcher when the time comes, or hey, when the bat will buy the arms, go to the bat. All that bullshit for all these years. Like here we are. They're real. They're on it. They're not well managed. I've met TJ Brightman. But on the baseball side, Elias can say I've got 3 prospects for this guy, but it's going to cost us $8 million this year and 22 next year. Are we in? I don't know. That's their whole payroll this year, right? I just said 30 million. That's 75% of their payroll, right? So, we got to save for Rutschman. His agent's going to hit us over the head. It's going to be 200 million. So all of that, they don't even have a lease. So I keep going back to fundamental grown-up stuff that I think about and say, are they going to win a World Series? People are asking me, are they going to win the World Series? I'm like, not with this pitching, but maybe if DL Hall, maybe if Grayson Rodriguez, if they blossom and it becomes McNally and Palmer in the 60, I'll buy into any of that, but they are going to need to make a move. They have the right general manager to do it. I'm not sure they have the right owner. I'm sure they don't have the right owner. Stop. They don't have the right owner. Now, whether they can get away with it this year or not, but they're going to need more if they're going to win the World Series. And we're going to say this for 4 months, right? We're going to say this right on up till August 1st or maybe even August 31st, given waiver wires.
Yeah. Well, there is no more waiver.
Oh,
deadline.
right, fair enough.
That went away. Right,
Thank
right.
you.
No, it's funny because I think of some.
It was only that way for
Orioles.
100 years. Sorry, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I just like I said, because I even caught myself on that last year. Because I was.
But
even,
you can still buy
time,
a pitcher August 28th. That's still possible in this sport now.
Well, I mean, I go back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago when they faced Eduardo Rodriguez. I mean, you look at someone like him who's still under contract for a couple years. I mean, making serious dough, but it's not stupid money where you would say, "Oh, I don't want to do that," because he's not living up to that contract.
Keep in mind, there's only one guy to say it now.
I understand that, but I'm talking as though I'm the owner or as I'm the general manager. I'm looking at it through that lens. Someone like that. probably going to be available because the Detroit Tigers are not very good. And I'm not really looking, as much as they looked like they were on a similar track to the Orioles in terms of a rebuild and getting that ship turned around. You're seeing how
Well,
it
the other
doesn't always
part of it,
turn around the way
somebody's going
that
to
they.
have him. He's going to be pitching for somebody in September and probably somebody in October. And he knows that, even though he's having cold days in Detroit right now, right? Like, so we've watched this a long time. You're going to be playing with him or against him at some point,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's where I'll go back to where the farm system is right now. I mean, you have guys at AAA right now who are either ready for the major leagues and there really isn't a spot for them, or there's someone who's going to be ready very soon for the major leagues and there isn't really a spot for them. So something's going to have to give at some point. Now, I'm not saying that means a trade next week or next month or even necessarily at the deadline, because
By the way, this is a
again,
problem the
that's above
Orioles have
my.
never had in your lifetime, by the way.
It's a
Literally.
good thing. Yeah, it's a good thing. I mean, the fact that they have Colton Cowser raking at AAA, the fact that they have Jordan Westberg, who's been at AAA now for getting close to a year. He's had a year worth of plate appearances and looks like at the very least he's ready to find out if how good of a major leaguer he's going to be. I mean, you have guys that are kind of waiting their time. We talked about this with Kyle Stowers before the most recent recall for him. So, it's part of it, but that's where it does factor into what you were talking about in terms of there can be some trades to be made, especially for pitching, but there will be a financial element involved there. Even if it's not lucrative, it'll be something, right? So, we're going to have to see how that plays out. But in the meantime, you do have a lineup that, 1 through 9, not everyone is raking. And, we'll talk about Gunnar Henderson, but I'll remind everyone, even though he was batting 190 entering the weekend, 366 on base percentage. So talk about a kid who isn't swinging the bat terribly well, but he's getting on base and finding a way to still be productive. So I look at that, and as much as some people will say, oh, he's hitting 190, and I'm really concerned about that, he's going to start hitting. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be a 300 hitter, but he's going to start hitting better than he has. And we saw him homer in Kansas City. But once he starts hitting, even if it's not crazy, that on-base profile that he has with that is going to make him a very valuable player. So, even guys like him that, haven't really gotten off to a blistering start by any stretch of the imagination, it's still guys are being productive and they're finding, even if it's sacrifice flies, we've seen the occasional sack bunt here and there. Guys are finding ways, and, that it's not easy. They're not blowing teams out. I mean, even on Thursday when they had a chance to blow out the Royals, we saw how that played out, but they're finding ways to win. And again, it's not, they're not blowing up the scoreboard with 6 and 7 run victories like the Rays had done for the bulk of April, but they're finding ways to win games. And I think for a young team that adds some extra value as the year goes on, that confidence level grows even more.
Luke Jones is my dude. He is Baltimore, Luke. I love to give him the weekend off, but the Orioles won't allow that sort of thing around here. We got Derby weekend, Mother's Day, M3 in. I'm spending some time at Adams Jeep on Saturday morning. Mike Bordick, my dear pal, is coming up to sign some autographs and help out with the Chesapeake Feline Association. If you know me, you know I love my cat. One thing, Luke, you never talk about your personal thing, but I know how much you love your cats. So this is your opportunity to plug for Chesapeake Feline Association and Adams Jeep on Saturday morning.
I love my cats, and for anyone who was an 80s kid like me and loved He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, my cats are named Cringer and Orko, 2 of the characters from He-Man. So, I have to credit my brother on that one. He named them, but definitely a special part of my life. I'm not going to lie.
There's no question about that for all of us who love our cats. So hope everybody has a great weekend out there. Luke and I'll be back after it next week as well. Maryland Crab Cake Tour. Let me plug away. We're at State Fair and we're in the shirt Catonsville on Friday. We're going to be at the local in Falston on the 23rd. I am working on dates in Halethorpe, Bel Air. The Mucho Gusto people got back to me. I'm really looking forward to that, especially on Cinco de Mayo. So hope everybody has a great, great weekend, enjoys the Derby, all the activities. Our friends at Chaucer are doing a big street party in Highlandtown. Want to send everybody over to see Brian if you're not doing that for sure. And of course, you can find me, Ness at BaltimorePositive.com, and Luke is Luke at WNST.net. On behalf of the Maryland Lottery and our friends at Window Nation, we'll hope to see you at State Fair next week, and we're going to be here all the time because we are WNST AM 1570. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.